I did not become a #1 single in so many countries as I had hoped. Because I think it, would have benefited from the story. I submitted the version with the story attached, and label said, John, it's 10 minutes of talking before the song. Not sending that around to radio. And I was like, oh, come on, I love it. This story is not true. This part I'm telling you right now. Also, it's all preface. It's not the actual story. So anyway, I grew up in Southern California, and you know how, oh, this story's going to be even longer than usual. do you know how when you're a child, you either gravitate toward things naturally, or you feel as though you did, right? You're not aware of how it is you come to like what it is you like. You just sort of feel like one day I looked at this thing and there was this thing I liked, right? And then when you're an adult, you become jaded and afraid of spin, so you don't like anything except Jandek records, right? So, but when you're a child, you flip the TV stations around and you see something that just calls to where you are and who you are. And so if you are alone on a Saturday morning and everybody's asleep or out of the house, you say, hey, that's what I want to watch. Professional wrestling. Maybe you don't even know it's called that. Maybe it's just guys in trunks hitting each other. You say, check out the dudes smacking the living God, awesome. Look at them go. So, well, that was me, right? I started watching wrestling, and wrestling in those days was a poor people's sport. It was not, the WWF, they could afford flash pots and stuff like that and all that. But back then, it was a sport in profound decline. And the only people who went to see wrestling were, people who knew a bargain when they saw it. $5 for 11 matches on a Wednesday. Wrestlers being announced as hailing from Argentina when really they're from El Monte, or West Covina. And I was really into it, right? I looked forward to that. I started watching it on the Spanish stations. I didn't speak Spanish, but it's like the Spanish stations, they were super into it. They had a 3-hour broadcast on Saturday. Awesome, right? And I was super into it. I would get wrestling magazines and read about these people who were on the East Coast who didn't come out to where we were. They were the main ones. Like LA was not a big market, and I would read about the big famous ones, who were Andre the Giant, Bruno Sammartino, and these guys, who were the big players. And then one day, one of them whom I had seen his picture in the magazine, seen his name, which I liked, popped up on the screen one Saturday morning being interviewed by Jeff Walton, the LA Channel interviewer. His name was Ox Baker. And the reason I think I remember him is this interview. I didn't see the match, but Jeff Walton said to Ox Baker, so Ox, you have a tough match coming up here in LA with our local hero, Chavo Guerrero, what do you have to say? And Ox Baker launched into this rant of which no sense could be made by human beings. And it was terrifying. He was like 6'4", and I'm a reading kid. I grew up, into books, and the more compelling your argument, the better it is, and the more likely you are to win. And that's what wins things, is reason, and persuasion, sweet persuasion, And Ox Baker said, Jeff, when I tell you that the blood is going to run from Chavo Guerrero's eyes on Saturday night at the Olympic Auditorium, then you'd better bring your hanky to ringside so you can dip it into the blood. And I was like, here you are confronted with brute force in the absence of all the things you thought were going to be victorious in the world. As it turns out, and as we all learned later, Ox Baker was right, and the rest of us were up on some romantic nonsense, right? So anyway, years later, I was thinking about Ox Baker, and I sort of had developed an affection for him, as you do for the things that you remember from childhood, and I sort of imagined this little story in which they run him out of town and try and kill him, but he comes back to exact his revenge, and it's called Ox Baker Triumphant.